Namaste. Hi, I'm Bruce Benefiel, and welcome to One World. Welcome to this week's edition of One World. Namaste, as I repeatedly announce, simply means the divine within me recognizes the divine within you. Imagine what it could be like if we could walk down the street and recognize the divine in everyone and everything. It'd be pretty wild. And it'd be pretty neat at the same time. This week's guests are Enocha Ron Versteege and Ron Versteege. Now, they both have combined energies and opened up the Center Emergence, which is the Center for Creative Living in Sedona. And with no further ado, I'll welcome them both. Enocha, Ron, glad to have you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, you guys have both combined into working together, not only as husband and wife, but as a team in your work. What prompted you to do that? I mean, there's some things there that I think can be shared that would really benefit our audience.
Yeah, we have a wonderful story to tell about that. I'll tell my little part of the story, and then you can tell your part. How's that? Okay. Because I was living in Sedona. I've actually been a resident of Sedona for over 17 years, which is unusual.
That's an old-timer up there.
I call myself a young old-timer.
Right, a young-timer.
Yeah, exactly. So I've really watched Sedona grow up as I've been growing up myself. And I'd done a lot of work on my own personal self and my spiritual development. And around the time I was 33 years old, I decided that I was really ready to meet my life mate, you know, the partner that I'd walk through life with. So I put out a call to the universe, you know, call it the energies that be, the Great Spirit, God, you know, whatever it is that your heart terms that special energy. And I asked the universe, I said, I really feel that I'm ready to meet my life's mate. And I got some very clear, direct guidance back, which was that I was to visualize myself as a giant magnet, and that I would be drawing into my life my appropriate life partner. Now notice they used the word appropriate life partner. So following that guidance, I did. And at night before I'd go to sleep, I would lay there and I would visualize myself as this giant magnet. And I would see myself pulling in and drawing in my life partner.
Bar or horseshoe?
Well, actually, you know how I didn't get the exact message on how I was to be this magnet, so I decided that I was going to use my chakra system, you know, the energy centers in my body, to actually be those giant centers that were drawing in.
Interesting.
And it was, because there was Ron in San Francisco, and he received the calling.
And how did you receive it, Ron?
Well, I have a very similar story to Enocha's. I was living in San Francisco, and I was working as a therapist. And I was at this point in my life, I think like everybody else, searching, really looking for a partner. And I was working with a group of people there. And one of the stories that they had is that they gave up on looking. They said what they did is to work on themselves. And I reached this point, I am so tired of looking. I can't find who my appropriate mate is, or was to be. So I decided to take some time off, and I literally took a 2-year period off, a sabbatical from relationships, so to speak. One morning after that 2 years, I woke up, and I can remember that time very, very clearly. It was like I woke up, and I had this inner voice that said, Ron, it's time. Your inner mate or your life mate is to come to you. Well, I started hearing about Sedona everywhere. Before this time, I never heard of Sedona anywhere. I thought it was a person, to be honest with you. And so I asked...
Was it one time?
Yes, it was. That's Sedona Shelby.
So I began to ask my inner guidance. And my inner guidance says, Ron, you're going to meet your life mate in Sedona. Now you have to understand, I've never been to Arizona. And for me, Arizona was a vast desert, and Sedona was just a little town. And I was wondering, what am I going to do in a small town? But I also knew that at this point in my life, that life is about risk. And so I said, well, you know, life is an adventure, life is a risk. And so I packed up everything, I closed my practice down, and I came to Sedona.
You forgot about the telepathic bridge.
Oh, yes, that's a very important part. So in asking my guidance, they said, well, Ron, to pull in your life mate, what you need to do is to create a rainbow bridge to her. And so I asked, what is that? They said, well, it's just a telepathic bridge. All you have to do is in your quiet time, in your meditation, just create or just begin to speak to your life mate. You don't know who she is, but just let her know that you're ready. So every night I began to talk to her. And it was only later, after we met, that we began to compare notes. I realized that Enocha was the one I was talking to, and it was Enocha's magnet that was literally
the
drawing
rainbow
me.
bridge was the link between the two because of the colors aligning with her chakras.
And also, interestingly enough, as the male energy would, it was putting out there, and as the female energy would, it was drawing in. So, and Ron literally came to my doorstep. And interestingly enough, before we met, we had both received the vision of what we would be doing together as life partners.
Let's move on with that.
Okay.
What prompted you to start Emergence?
Okay, well, it was very interesting. Before Ron came, I had rented this very large home in Sedona, not having any evidence to prove financially that I could afford the home, or that I even had the need for that kind of space. And yet it was the perfect space for a small healing center. It had spaces for offices and a large workshop room, and also a large part of the house is underground, which is like in the womb of the mother. So it provides an incredible safety for type of cathartic work.
Now, as a healer, and for clarification for our audience, you're a licensed or a certified holistic massage therapist.
Yes, and I specialized in mind-body integration.
Okay, and Ron, you have a master's in transpersonal
counseling. Psychology.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are real modalities of enabling people to go through the healing process.
Absolutely, and even more than that, what I studied in and then what Ron studied in fits together perfectly to link body, mind, soul, heart, emotions. So we really do complement each other in our work together. And like I was saying, both of us had been given a vision of how we would work together as a team and support one another to support others to go through their healing and transformational process. So interestingly enough, when Ron appeared on my doorstep and saw this great big house, he says, well, this is part of the vision. This is to be a healing center. And I said, yes, I know, I've been waiting. So it went, once Ron linked his energy, and it all started to emerge as Emergence.
Oh, that's great. Now, in your work together, what kinds of fears did you encounter?
I think the first fear that we encountered was that we got married on the harmonic convergence, which was a very big day in Sedona. So we started off our married life going through the fire, so to speak. We had 2,000 people at our wedding on Bell Rock. Do you believe it? It made it to the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune, and not that we had any intention of that. And it was down here in the on the news in Phoenix. But we really had to walk through our fears that day, realizing that maybe none of our guests were going to make it to the wedding.
Well, and also defining who we are and what our work really is about. And we work in the field of transformation. And transformation is a very generic term. I mean, I'm sure most of the audience is wondering, what exactly does transformation mean? Well, transformation for us involves three processes. One is healing. All of us have wounds from our childhood and our body that need to be healed. The second is empowerment. And many of us are wanting to be, to create results and to be effective in our life. That's very, very important. And the third step in this process for us is spiritual awakening. Just awakening our consciousness, our awareness, expanding that to truly be multidimensional.
And realizing our oneness.
That's right, exactly. To who we really are and how connected we are to all that is.
And the way you two came together is a perfect example of that.
Well, it did prove to us that there are no such thing as time and space and boundaries of land, because our intention zeroed beyond that or cut through that.
The Native Americans always talk about intentions and the level of intention that you have in addressing a subject or an endeavor. And I think that that's one of the key factors that in that transformation process we really need to pay attention to.
And also
and
surrender.
take responsibility for it.
Surrender was a very important concept or idea for us to learn. For us, I think that for me to surrender to a relationship, to say, I don't know how this is going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to create what I want in my life. I have the intention, and I surrender to the process. I'll do my work, and I'll leave the work for Spirit or God, however you want to express that, for him, her, and all that is to do.
Right. And just wait until those things face you, because you know that when you do, after having gone through the process, or at least parts of it enough times, you do realize that what you ask for, you do get.
And sometimes in very magical ways. I realize that our story is somewhat magical, and there's a part in me that says we shouldn't engage in magical thinking, and yet our experience says that when your intent and your commitment is strong, magic shows up in that space.
Yeah, and it's not something that you're invoking in any way, shape, or form. It simply happens.
Exactly.
It's like working to be at the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
You're there because you're working to be,
And
and
you're
it
listening.
seems magical.
And you're listening.
Exactly, exactly. Now, how do you see that fitting into the common human experience around you? Do you see those types of things happening, or more or less?
Well, just in the context of what we're speaking of, you know, one of the dangers that I see in the world is what we call fundamentalism. It's a very narrow way of perceiving life as right and wrong, good and bad. And I think that's the biggest danger to creating fragmentation or alienation that you're referring to. And I think that the opposite of that is an inclusive thinking, is that there is no right and wrong per se. There are consequences, but there's no right and wrong, and there's no good and bad. There's just consequences. And I think that's what we're here to learn, is what the consequences of our thinking, the consequences of our behavior and action is.
And how to make those choices appropriately.
Exactly, by making a few mistakes sometimes. Even.
Right. Well, if you don't make, you know, the old, or a lot of the people that have been written about, especially within, like Napoleon Hill, and the people that he was introduced to through Andrew Carnegie. You know, if you don't make mistakes, you're not doing anything.
Well, one of the ways that we look at,
I was going to say, we don't even call them mistakes, we call them opportunities.
Right. That's the new paradigm, is looking at them as opportunities for growth, for transformation, building blocks to success.
Exactly. Well, another way that we look at it is that some of us are just spectators in life, and we're victims. We choose to be that. We can choose to be players. And the thing that comes up to, you know, to refer to that question that you mentioned before, is fear. Fear seems to be the wall that I think every one of us is destined to have to master. And I would say that's what's come up every step of the way for us. But each time we go through that wall of fear, I think that's where the miracles are.
Or it's more like a gateway now. It's like in the Oriental temples, they always picture there's either lions or gargoyles that stand at the gateway of the sacred temple, going into the unknown, which is oftentimes the unknown of our own self, or the unknown of, you know, a certain territory in life.
You're going to address the demons.
Yes, you do. And now I think we've gotten to the point where we just acknowledge them, you know, realizing that they're always going to be there, you know, when we're ready to step off the cliff. And so now we walk through the temple gates anyway and go to our next step, rather than let them be there to stop us.
Exactly. And that's what the whole process is about, recognizing that fear, walking through it,
Exactly.
realizing that the essence of that fear is love
Exactly.
in its many splendored forms.
Yes, in one of its expressions, yes.
Right.
Well, you know, when I was studying psychology, you know, there is a statistic that about 90% of our fear is unreal. It's simply imagined or learned.
Right.
And what we learned in Mastering Fear is to distinguish between real fear, fear in which there is real danger, and fear which is simply imagined. And by going through the fear that is imagined, we can go to the other side.
There's a little saying using the word fear, F-E-A-R, false expectations appearing real.
That's one. And I've also heard false evidence appearing real.
Exactly.
And Willie Whitefeather says, free every anxious reaction.
Oh, that's a good one.
I like that.
Yeah.
Can we have that one?
Yeah.
Use it. He gives it away.
Great,
He says,
great.
you know.
We'll give Whitefeather the credit.
Okay.
And that's the neat thing about the synergy that seems to be about people that are experiencing the new paradigm. I choose new paradigm in this way rather than new age.
Right.
Because it's a new paradigm. It's looking for the balance and the harmony in all that is, and not separating things. Speaking of separating, what kinds of barriers do you see in the world around you, and especially multiculturally, in working towards this transformation process?
What I'm observing is that life as a natural process is pushing us very directly into our own personal transformation as well as planetary transformation. More than ever, people are right up against their stuff, so to speak. You know, the whole unfoldment of awareness about dysfunctional families and dysfunctional environments and things coming out of the closet in terms of now what we're aware of but that we were never aware of before is bringing a whole new awareness into how we can heal and how we can transform our lives.
And whatever skeletons we've had in the closet are going to come out.
That's right, exactly. You know, it is facing that shadow part of ourselves. And I was very gifted at a very young age myself to have to really look at my own stuff. I had an issue for a long time, 15 years of compulsive overeating, and then developing the eating disorder bulimia. And that, for me, was my invitation to start on this journey of healing and transformation. And I believe that we as individuals have it as a personal responsibility or as a personal invitation, you know, to go on this adventure of healing and of discovery of who we really are. And through that inner process, what we do is we discover who we really are, which is that we are God-centered. And once each one of us is willing to take that journey, then we become a world that is based in peace and love. And it is a matter of going through the darkness or the shadow part of ourselves in order to get to the other side, which is all that we are, which is total light. Yeah.
Ron, how about you? What do you see in that relationship?
What comes up for me is one of the principles that we've discovered in working with people that has had a profound effect on their healing is simply relationship. That people who have come into a relationship, a new relationship with themselves, with their body, with other people, with their family, there's always a profound healing in that. So when we look at the earth or we look at the world family, I think what we're really talking about is how do we come into a new relationship with the planet? How do we come into a new relationship with other cultures? And if we're in a state of rejection or projection, we can't come into an aligned or loving relationship. And I think that's always the key. You know, what do we need to let go of to come into an aligned relationship? And that's healing for us.
Right.
One of the most wonderful things that I ever did is I traveled around the world to many, many different places like Tibet and India and Nepal and Egypt and just all over. And I really got to see how we are all one people. There's no separation by just because you live in this country or that country or you speak this language or you have this color skin that you're different. Right. And that brought a very deep sense of unity within myself to realize that this world is one body. And
we are one people, we are one planet, we are one mind.
We are.
And children know that. You know, it's so interesting that kids do not have prejudices. They don't reject. They're just curious. I mean, if you're ever out on a playground, they walk up to people and they want to, well, who are you and why are you that color? And, they just want to know. They're curious. And I think that as we bring in that child consciousness, we begin to embody that again, as well as our maturity, that we're curious and we want to know. It opens
Seems
up.
like there was a person a few thousand years ago that said, "Be ye as little children."
Exactly.
And, I find that one of the things, at least for myself, that seems to be present throughout the entirety. Granted, there are, a lot of teachers and masters and avatars and whatever you want to call them, prophets, that have put pieces of it together. But for me, it still goes back to the very things that the fundamentalists are using against the new paradigm. And that's the scriptures, and even Jesus' teachings and the way he lived his life, a truer understanding of what he was really presenting, that it really wasn't him per se as, wanting to be worshipped or anything like that. Much more the opposite. He was wanting to empower everybody to do and be all that they could be and be all that he was and more.
And that's for us, that is really the key to a true master. And I think we have a lot of false prophets in this day and age, and a lot of scandals. And for us, it is the teacher who empowers their students that I feel, where we feel is a real teacher and a real healer. It really is about empowerment.
And basically, a true teacher will just continuously turn their students inward to the teacher within, because that's where our teacher is. I know for myself, I could never align with one teacher, guru, sect, denomination, creed called religious organization, because I knew that my true teaching for myself was an inner path, and I believe that there's as many paths to God or spirit as there are people on the planet. And if we can all, as brothers and sisters, empower each other, it's like that word namaste.
Right.
It's honoring the knowingness that God is within you too. God is not separate to me, or God is not separate to those that
Regardless
follow
of
a
your
particular
behavior.
Oh yeah.
Or your ideals or
or what the kind of clothes you wear, the color of your skin.
Right.
Yes.
It's simply what's inside of you.
Well, just to address that, I think that there's a lot of healing we need to do. And we just encounter this more and more. And one of the things that needs healing is our inner child. And when we look at why people are the way they are, and why there is the violence, and why there is the rejection, and all of that stuff that we don't like, a lot of it comes from a very hurt, a very wounded child inside.
Sure.
And I think it's one of the great
Our
tragedies
creative
in life
nature
right
has
now.
been denied, so to speak, by the way our society has been structured. And we haven't, I think, known any better until the late 60s, when we really started questioning authority. We gave up our power, so to speak, to the greater powers that be, such as our government, as our parents did. They wanted to believe in the government that was not only supporting them, but allowing them to live freely. And by giving that up and not questioning it, things gradually became worse and worse until today it's really...
But it's a healing crisis, though.
Exactly.
Well,
the transformation of the phoenix, the legend of the phoenix. All of it's going to be torn asunder, uprooted, burnt to the ground, toasted, whatever you want to say, in order for the new paradigm to evolve and to be born from that.
And it's really a very old paradigm. I mean, even though we call
it really
new,
is. Yeah.
we're really resurrecting a very old consciousness, a primordial consciousness, so to speak, a multidimensional consciousness. And we think that it's new, and it really isn't. We're recovering. We're recovering what has been very ancient, and yet we're recovering it in a way that's perhaps more mature than it was before. Because
so.
we've gone through a long journey.
That we have, and we are coming back to that, to recognizing that we are all one again, and then looking for how we can address the needs that we see by going out and doing whatever we feel is necessary in order to help that process along. Enocha, how or what kind of advice can you give on a practical level, everyday level, to someone who's experiencing turmoil in their lives and wanting to make that transformation.
Yes, thank you for asking me that question. What I'd like to say is the most important ingredient for me is the journey of falling in love with yourself. I believe that that's where all healing, transformation, awakening, and spiritual enlightenment come from, is actually being able to be that love for yourself. It has to start at home. Before we could ever have a relationship of health with anyone else, we must find that place within ourselves where there is total acceptance, non-judgment, and unconditional love and support, and a real trust of oneself.
What's a simple technique to apply every day?
Well, one of the things that worked very, very well for me is I did mirror work with myself, where I would just simply look at myself in the mirror, eye to eye, and I'd say, Enocha, I love you unconditionally, just the way you are. And the more I said that, see, I first had to fake it till I made it.
Right.
I didn't have a lot of evidence to
Well, you're
support that I
changing
was
habit.
lovable,
Yeah.
yes. But I realized that that was my key to my own healing process, especially with the eating disorders and the bulimia. And so I just continuously affirm that for myself. Eye to eye, they say your eyes are your windows to your soul. And when I could connect with my eyes and say that, I started to believe it, and then I started to feel it, and then I started to be it, and my whole body transformed. Also, I magically just lost the weight.
It's an amazing process.
Yes, it is.
Ron, how about you? We've got just about a minute left.
Okay, for me, what has been the most growth transforming experience is simply going through fears. And I would say to live a life at risk. And that doesn't mean endangerment, but in other words, to take the risk when there's fear, to step through it. And I went through a process of simply stepping through every fear that I had. I mean, I still have many to go, but if you start small, the small fears, going up and saying hi to somebody when
Baby
you're
steps.
afraid to, yes, or standing up and raising your hand in front of a class, it grows into confidence.
Right.
And it's a way that it's what you need for the journey.
Very much so.
Confidence and love. It's a beginning.
Exactly. Thank you both for coming. I really enjoyed having you here. It's been a real blessing, and I'm sure that the audience has enjoyed what you've been able to share with them also.
Well, thank you, Bruce.
Thanks
We've
again.
enjoyed it ourselves. It's been great.
It's been great.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you all for watching. If you've got some questions or concerns or would like to know more about the guests on our show, please give us a call at 602-264-0986, and I'll be willing to answer your questions and refer you to whoever you need to talk with, and hopefully help you get better connected to yourself. Or if you've got some questions, give us a write, drop us a line, give us a write, okay, we'll go with that one. Care of One World, P.O. Box 32035, Phoenix, Arizona, 85064. Again, I'm Bruce Benefiel, also known as Zendor, which simply means the door to what is. And by sharing with our guests here on the show, with you, that gives you an idea to more of what's available. Again, I'm Bruce Benefiel. Namaste.